My name is Karina Harney, Playboy's Playmate of the Year, 1992.
And I'm Echo Johnson, Miss January, 1993. Welcome to the Bunny Chronicles. Let's go. Hi, welcome back to the show. What's up, Carrie?
Hi, Echo.
We got Miss Carrie Yazel back in the studio. Oh, I see the bunny.
I pulled it out.
I
had to dig around, though.
I couldn't find mine, so I have this little gold one, but it'll suffice.
I had to clean it.
And Carrie and I are rocking the pink without even knowing. I love it. Okay. So we have a super amazing guest today. I'm so excited. This is an absolute honor. Victoria Valentino, Playboy's Miss September 1963, one of the top 100 centerfolds of the 20th century. Wow. But Victoria actually started her career as a bunny at the Playboy clubs at the LA Club when it opened in 1964 on New Year's Eve. Now, Victoria has a long list of accomplishments and accolades, and I just cannot wait to get into everything. She's a media personality, keynote speaker, author, activist, performs live theater, spoken word, and she mentors sexual assault survivors as she's one of Cosby's rape survivors. And that's going to be a really, we'll get into that towards the end, but very important what she accomplished. So welcome to the show, Miss Victoria. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So we're going to start out with the bunny ears because Carrie and I, and as I told you last night when I was speaking to you, we have the bunny manual, and we were just going through it, and it's so detailed and it's so interesting, and it was very progressive for its time in terms of, you know, what you guys got paid, the benefits that were offered, whatnot. Specifically, what stood out to me was, first, you guys had health insurance and you had tax advice. And that's like unheard of at that time. So tell us about that.
I had no idea. That's my entire statement. I had no idea we were getting paid. I think it was $2.03 an hour.
Uh-huh. Okay.
3-inch heels and those costumes. We had to show up before work in the dressing room an hour ahead of time.
Right.
And check out our costumes from the wardrobe mistress.
Right. And she was important, right? The wardrobe mistress and the bunny mom were important figures because the detail, or the attention to detail rather, was uber important right down to your costume. So tell us about that.
Oh, absolutely. Everything had to be perfect. You couldn't go onto the floor with a scuffed shoe. Your 3-inch heels had to match your costume. You were assigned 2 costumes with 2 different colors. They had to be checked out and turned back in at the end of your shift. 8-hour shifts, let me tell you, that was not so easy.
No.
Yeah. And, you know, you had to wear your ears in a certain way. You had to have a clean tail, obviously. Yeah. And you couldn't have a run in your stockings. And of course, in the early 60s, that was when pantyhose were actually first invented.
Oh, really?
You know, there had been tights before for dancers, but they were professional garments. But actual pantyhose, that was a new thing in the beginning of the 60s. Up until then, we had to wear, you know, regular stockings with seams and garter belts, and may I mention Kotex belts?
Right. Kotex belts.
Oh, yeah. More uncomfortable.
It was so fun. Let me just tell you.
We thought we had it hard.
Thinking about it. You guys have it easy.
That's wild.
So, the way they designed the costumes, so the bust, the bodice was lower than anybody's normal boobs were.
Okay.
And so that made you have to stuff them. So you put in rubber bust pads and then you dropped your own boobs on top of them. So it made you look twice as large as you normally were. And most of us were fairly busty. I remember the shock I had one day showing up in the dressing room, and there was this one bunny who I thought had, you know, a great bust line. And she was flat as a pancake, and she was standing there with surgical tape, pulling herself together to make cleavage.
Wow.
Then 2 rubber bust pads in the bodice, and that made her look like she was very well endowed. I was just mesmerized, I was like, wow.
That's great that she got hired knowing that. I mean, I love to hear that because everybody likes different shapes and sizes. So I think that's nice.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the bunnies did, display. I mean, it was a broad spectrum of ethnicities and looks and everything. It was important. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the bunnies were really kind of trendsetters. I mean, we had the chocolate bunnies, which, and we had the first Chinese Playmate and the second Chinese Playmate, both of whom were bunnies. I worked the Playmate bar, much to my chagrin. I wanted to work the showrooms, but, because my centerfold was backlit hanging over the cash register.
Oh, cool.
I wound up working the Playmate bar, and I was working with Gwen Wong, who was the second Chinese Playmate. But she became a Playmate after she was a bunny. Chena Lee was already a Playmate and then became a bunny.
But it was very uncommon, right? To have both, be a bunny and a Playmate?
No, you can be either or. Some of the Playmates never wanted to become a bunny. But if you wanted to become a bunny, you were a shoo-in because you were already a Playmate, and they wanted, as many of the gorgeous gals in the centerfold to be bunnies as they possibly could.
Okay.
But you could be a bunny and still not qualify to be a centerfold.
Are you friends with anyone? Do you have any acquaintances from back in those times?
Oh, absolutely. I have a circle of old bunny friends. Chena Lee, by the way, who and I'm not terribly close with, but one of my best friends for who was my training bunny in 1964. She and I are still friends. She's my kid's auntie. I'm her kid's auntie. Her kids are in their 60s. And she lives in Selma, Alabama, half the year. And the other half of the year, she lives in Sydney, Australia. And she was one of the original chocolate bunnies, has a book called The Chocolate Bunny.
Oh, that's Francesca.
Francesca.
Yeah, she's going to come on the show. Yeah, I can't wait to interview her.
I love hearing that. That makes me so happy that you've kept in touch because that's...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Well, Fran was always the hub of the bunny wheel. I think probably had it not been for Fran, I probably wouldn't know anybody. But she and I stayed in touch. And so because of her, everybody else that she knew became part of our inner circle.
What was your favorite part of being a bunny?
Well, truthfully, I was never really thrilled about being a bunny. It was very hard work. I had been, I just escaped from a trafficking situation after I had become a Playmate, courtesy of my son's father. He began trafficking me because suddenly I had a little celebrity status that he could then use. And so he trafficked me to big celebrity names. I had been a New York trained and Connecticut trained actress, 9 years of classical ballet. I did Shakespeare. I did legit theater. And believe me, being a pinup was not part of my agenda. It was his idea. And so, this was 1963. And I had grown up in Connecticut, very conservative, pre-Revolutionary War town. And but I was born in Hollywood. So after I graduated high school, I wound up back in West Hollywood, again, courtesy of my folks. So I was sort of a pawn on everybody else's chessboard, it seemed, at that time in my life. And so he wound up marketing me to, big stars. I mean, people who, are honored and iconic people.
Wow,
And
that's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's insane, Victoria.
yeah, it really was horrible. So I managed to escape from it October 64.
Okay.
Thanks to my parents. And, there's a whole story behind that, which I don't want to go into.
Yeah,
You can
that's
read,
fine. That's fine.
read my damn book,
Yeah. Read your book.
Right.
And, but the thing is that my first job after I got out of there was cocktailing at the Whiskey A Go Go, and Johnny
Cool.
River was playing live there. I met my thrill on Blueberry Hill and the Go-Go Dancers, and it was fun. It was lighthearted. There were 6-hour shifts. You got to dress in little black short skirts with fishnet hose and, look like a French patch dancer, and you just weave around with your tray on your fingertips. And it was a lot of fun. And we made a lot of money, and it was very loose and easy. And you didn't have any particular regulations like you did at Playboy. Well, I worked there a month, and one of the other waitresses said, "Hey, did you know there's a Playboy club opening on the Strip? And, you're a Playmate. We should go down. I'm sure you'll get a job." And so I thought, well, yeah, it sounded like a smart move. And so I did. Of course, I went down, and we both were hired. And it turned into really a difficult job. I mean, you were taught, you had 2 weeks training before you could go on the floor for the opening. The opening was New Year's Eve. And so it was like a really big deal. Everybody was there, all the big stars, and Hef flew in from Chicago and all of his buddies. And so we had
I mean, wasn't it like you had 150 different drinks that you had to remember the mix, everything to call out to the bartender, and then the placement on your tray? Everything had to be particular.
The way you carried it, the way you
the bunny
delivered
did.
it.
Yeah, this is true. I don't know the number of drinks, but I know even working at the Whiskey, you have every bartender expects his cocktail waitress to have a calling order, So however he delivers it is not necessarily the way you wind up setting it down at the table. So you have to do a lot of math in your head, and remember all of the stuff if you have several tables. So it was quite a challenge. But yeah, and the thing was we had to mix the drinks at the table backwards, because if we served forwards, our boobs would fall out.
I would imagine.
Wild.
Yeah,
makes sense.
So the two moves that were taught to us were the bunny dip, which was moving, carrying the tray and then holding the tray all the time while you were mixing at the table and pouring drinks backwards.
Wow.
So
that's a physical job.
Standing, yeah, and say if you had a table of 4, right there, that's probably a minimum of a 25-pound tray. So imagine if you had a table of 6 or 8, which you had at time
for sure.
So for instance, you just ordered a scotch and water. Sounds pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
You had a shot glass of scotch, you had a rock glass, and then you had a glass carafe of water. So that was just one drink.
Wow. The details.
So you had that. Maybe some guy wanted a beer. You had to be taught how to pour a beer backwards and not overflow it, not have too much foam, not have a beer without any head on it.
Sure.
So, everything was taught to us, and everything was absolute perfection. And aside from that, you had always to worry about your costume. You couldn't have a stain. You couldn't have a run. You couldn't wear your your ears incorrectly. Everything had to be perfect. And we had false eyelashes and wigs and false fingernails. Nobody had acrylic nails in those days. They were stick-ons.
Right.
They were glued on.
Did it make being a Playmate even sound more appealing? I mean, did you
So she was a Playmate first, actually, I'm realizing.
Oh, that's
because
right.
1963,
1963.
Yeah.
Well, as a Playmate, did you do things like we had promotions where we'd go and sign autographs? And did you have any of that kind of thing?
No. The deal was, well, first of all, at that time, there was only one photo studio, only one Playboy outpost on the West Coast at all. And that was Mario Casilli's photo studio on North Island in Hollywood. And we went and we did all the candids, on location. And we did the centerfold in the studio. And, and he had the 8x10 still camera. And they wanted, my hair was kind of a dirty blonde, goldy color. And he shot a lot of the candids and a lot of the test shots for the centerfold on location. And when they got the film back with this one pose that Hef wanted, it had a green tint on it. This was before photo correction, before Photoshop, all of that. This was real film shot with real cameras. And so they couldn't correct it. So, and everything in those days had to be sent back to Chicago for Hef to approve.
Right.
And of course, this is also before email. So everything was done by snail mail and telephone.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, Hef decided that he wanted to recreate this one shot that was really beautiful. It was in this pale yellow peignoir standing in this Italian marble palazzo. And I was leaning against this beautiful brown marble column with the late afternoon light shining in. And it was very soft, very feminine. And he wanted everything recreated in the studio, me wearing black lace against a white column. And he wanted my hair black.
Oh, see, I noticed that in your centerfold. I was shocked that your hair was dark because I've always known you as blonde. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I am blonde.
Yeah, because you are.
Blonde, but...
I've never heard that before. That's really interesting. I mean, he could have chosen a brunette, but he wanted you, and that was the adjustment he needed. Now, was it only topless or...
Yeah, in the 60s, it was...
Nobody showed any pubic hair in those days at all. So, everything was either airbrushed out or they posed you in a way where the fabric covered your...
Yeah.
What about your boobs? Was that showing yet in the 60s? What? Your breast, were the breasts showing in the 60s, or was it still a silhouette?
We showed. He was a boob man. At least he used to be. Yeah. Once upon a time.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting when you go through the decades, like in the Playboy books, and you see the progression of the nudity. So that's what we were interested about in the 60s of what was the span of the nudity at that time?
Sure.
But the 50s, we were coming out of, this was post-World War II, where there were a lot of glamour girls, and 50s, Betty Grable. So it was truly the girl next door. And of course, that whole girl next door image was fashioned after Janet, what was her last name now? She had been the manager of his subscription department.
Yeah.
And they had a long-term affair. And eventually she moved, became a registered nurse and lived in Connecticut. And it was the weirdest thing. My mother and I used to have this little community of singers at the Scottish pub in the Los Feliz area. And we knew, without knowing that we knew, her first husband.
Janet Pilgrim. Janet Pilgrim.
Janet Pilgrim. Yeah. Of course, her real name was Charlene Whitelaw. She has since died. Yeah. And Hef gave her that name.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the only playmate who had been a playmate for three times.
That's right.
In the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and so
amazing.
Yeah, so it was really an innocent time in history.
Sure.
In the 50s when she was a playmate and when Playboy started. So it was really groundbreaking. And then we were breaking out of this kind of repressive sexual period of history, where women couldn't even have their own credit card. You couldn't buy property without your husband or your father's signature. You were really property in so many ways.
Mm.
You were expected to grow up, get married. If you went to college, you were expected to go to college to find a qualified husband.
Right. Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
That was the time, the era, for sure.
Would you have done the centerfold if it had been full nudity like it was for us? Mm. Or would that have been just so beyond the times? And would you have gotten a lot more pushback, like from family and friends?
Well, first of all, it was never my choice to become a playmate. It was my husband's idea, my son's father's idea. We were friends with a professional photographer, an African-American guy, my mother's age, a guy named Harry Drinkwater, who's since passed away. And he did all of the iconic shots and never got credit for it. Mm. Sadly, because we did a whole bunch of test shoots for photos that he submitted to Playboy, thinking in those days that he would be the photographer, not knowing. And so he wound up signing away his rights. Right. And I remember before Mario died, who was my photographer, he said to me, I keep getting credit for that photo with you in the chess set. And he said, no, I just simply don't remember taking it. And I said,
because you didn't. That's funny.
And poor Harry, he was very bitter about that because that was really, it was brilliant work that he did and he never got credit for it.
Mm. Was it ever published anywhere? Were those shots published?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Playboy recycled them, and they still, my calendar shot was a Harry Drinkwater shot. Everything was attributed to Mario Casilli.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And my son's father scammed. He took the money that I made from the centerfold. I never saw a dime, and the finder's fee, which should have gone to Harry. He also took that. And then additionally, my family, they were still back in Connecticut, and they got disinvited to dinner when the host's brother saw my centerfold. It had hit the stands that day. Oh. And he told their host, and they were so shocked that they disinvited my parents, and they were just horrified and humiliated, and I was disowned for several years because of it.
Wow.
Yeah, it really threw me into a terrible situation, which made me, of course, very vulnerable to being trafficked, because by that time I had our child and I had 2 stepchildren who were toddlers, and he held my children hostage while he sent me off to clients, and I was never allowed out of the house with the children alone.
Oh, how did you get away from that? And what year was it when you started at the Benny Close? Were you like, I'm done? You left?
No, it was before that. It was October. I had gotten so sick. I was down to nothing. He had starved me and beaten me. He was very violent.
That's horrible.
And so I tried to escape, and my problem was always I couldn't leave my toddler stepchildren, because they didn't know that I wasn't their real mother. That was because he brought them to me when they were so little, and it was heartbreaking. And my son was 14 months old, and finally he went out to take the babysitter home one night, and I found that I had no choice. And my parents had already moved out from Connecticut. My father had gone back to Disney's working. He was a background artist. And I felt we were living in Laurel Canyon, and they were living down on Hollywood Boulevard near the opening of the canyon. And suddenly I felt safe harbor is within reach, and I just had to make a real decision. And I knew he'd be back shortly. And he always had a girlfriend who was willing to jump in and take care of the children. So I had to just pack up the baby and
go do what you had to do. Get out.
Yeah, just to save my life, because I had gone down to like 72 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
I was dry retching. He was karate chopping me across the throat, backhanding me, knocking me down. Well, anyway, he caught me and beat me for 3 hours until I was unconscious.
Oh, good God.
And then when I came to, like the next day or something, I managed to sneak a call to my mother, and she was going to come up with my father, who was, older, and I was afraid for him. So I said, no, I'll figure it out, and
trying to protect them.
Yeah, trying to protect them while they were trying to protect me. And anyway, she consulted with one of my aunties, who said, call the damn cops. Don't wait another minute. And so she did. And they came up to the house and saw racially mixed people in the house, my children and him. And they busted us all. There was one guy who was a friend of my husband's, who had a single joint of marijuana in his pocket. Somebody who just randomly come over, and it was a felony in those days.
Right.
Busted everybody. They took my children away from me, and my kids were in a foster home. My baby was in a foster home for a whole year before I was allowed to take him back.
Good God.
And so working at the Playboy Club was showing that I could be a responsible mother.
Okay.
He was in jail. And the FBI were visiting me because he must have been involved with something, which to this day, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it was a horrible situation. So, all the other girls and the bunnies were having a good time. It was like a sorority, and many of them, it was the only glamorous thing that ever had happened to them in their lives, and to this day.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. No, it was profound for,
Victoria, were you later in life able to meet a nice man that you could trust after all that you've been through? Was there any positive men that you went, okay, they're not all.
Yeah. It's hard after that because you don't trust.
Yeah.
No, I've really never had. I've never had a positive relationship. My second daughter's father, I thought, was, the love of my life. And then when I got pregnant with her, he wanted me to have an abortion. And it was my third pregnancy for him. I'd lost the previous two. And I was determined to have her. And he abandoned me twice during that pregnancy. Left me with a 22-acre dairy goat farm in Oregon to run in the coldest winter we'd had in 40 years. He waltzed back in eventually, but wow. No, I after you have so much trauma, I think it's very difficult to and I was already, by the time I got out of high school, I was already a multi-rape survivor. Mm-hmm. So I had a few difficult years there between the time I was 17 and the time I was, up until the time I was 22, I guess, 21, I got out of all of that, but I was still bouncing off walls, PTSDing everywhere.
Of course.
And not really, how do you recognize what's healthy?
That's a good point, because it is that cycle, and the cycle of domestic violence, and unfortunately I've been exposed to it too, and multiple women I know, and it is hard to come out of that and find a man, because you tend to make the same mistakes without knowing and think, oh, this one's going to be good. And for whatever, because of your PTSD, because of the traumas, it's a really hard thing to navigate. It takes a long time, but at the end of the day, sometimes you do find someone, and I have, thank God. But
not
a lot
always.
of women, they stay
Scars
in the
are scars. That's
So with all that said, let's get into 2016. Always inspired by activism, you became the founding member of ARSOL, which stands for End Rape Statute of Limitations,
Right.
and the Justice for Victims Act, effectively abolishing the SOL in California for rape and sexual assault. And you were instrumental in seeing Cosby prosecuted for his decades and decades of crimes against women.
That's right. Well, the root of my activism and my coming out about being raped by Cosby was, it culminated after, well, first of all, after I left the Playboy Club and, after the first 6 months, and I did other things and acted in a lot of non-union films and union stuff, and became a folk singer and was writing a lot of songs and picking a lot of guitar and doing hootenannies, open mic night kind of thing. Mm. And I got a recording contract for Capitol Records to do an album. And that was the end of 1969. And my music attorney, who was Frank Zappa's and the Cowsills and Linda Ronstadt's music attorney, and his brother was their personal manager, as he was mine. And my little boy, who had just turned 6, drowned in his swimming pool at the beginning of the party that he was giving to celebrate the successful negotiation of my recording contract. And so I wound up living with Francesca for a period of time in Laurel Canyon because I was just incapable of functioning alone. And she saved my life, And so I was running out of my front money for the contract, and I couldn't sing anymore. It was like you see your child face down at the bottom of the deep end of a pool. It's a little scary bit of music and joy out of your life.
Absolutely.
So he recommended that I go and audition for Bill Cosby because he had this television show. We thought he was doing I Spy. I have since found out that it was the Cosby Show. So I guess that was the show after. And so I went, and he received me in his trailer, not an audition studio. And Franny had the good sense. She said, "Take that picture of Tony." That was my son. Mm-hmm. She said, tell him your story. Tell him what happened. And so I did. And he was absolutely mesmerized looking at this 8x10 of my son, looking directly into the lens with his little 60s afro. Right. It was a beautiful child. And he just sat there staring at the picture. And I just told him my story, and it got really uncomfortable. And finally, I realized, or I thought, I was too much of a basket case for him to trust hiring as an actress, right? I didn't realize, of course, that, he invited gals to his trailer so he could sexually assault them. But I just stood up, grabbed the picture and said, "Thank you," and walked out. But then I was with my roommate because I moved. My grandmother died 3 weeks after my son died. So eventually I moved from France into her house in West Hollywood. My roommate and I went to a restaurant, the Cafe Figaro, down on Melrose near Doheny. I don't think it's there anymore. But anyway, I didn't know at the time that Cosby was a part owner. And we're sitting at the table, and he came to the table. Well, he already knew my story. Mm-hmm. So opening. And I was sitting crying into my onion soup because I was having a hell of a bad day. I was just, it hits you like a horse kicking you in the gut every once in a while. It just comes in. And this many years later, it's still hits.
Yeah.
And And he opened the conversation and put her in charge of me and suggested that she take me down to this Finnish steam bath on Santa Monica Boulevard, and they'd get a massage, and then he'd send his driver over to my grandma's house and pick us up and meet us on the Strip and take us to dinner. And it would be good for Vicky,
Yeah.
because he's in such bad shape. So
that's what he said. That's what Cosby said. It'd be good for Vicky.
Yeah. So, that's basically what we did. And that was the night that he gave us pills to take, because I was not being the cheerful, audience that he apparently wanted. And he was, sparking off of her, because she was actually the one he wanted. And I was sort of the tag along, the excuse for him being with her, I guess. And we both had boyfriends at the time, which was, the silly thing. But anyway, so he made it very clear that I was being a wet blanket and I should take this pill because it'll make us feel better. It'll make us all feel better. It'll make you feel better. And so, he kind of guilted me into taking this pill. And I thought it was an upper, because that's what everybody was taking in those days in the nightclub. All of the doctors and the managers, everybody would give you diet pills to keep your weight down so you could fit into the bunny costumes.
Stay up late.
Work more hours. Be careful the whole time your feet were killing you. All of that. So I took the pill and she took the pill and he pretended to take a pill.
Oh, my God.
And then leaned over and put another pill in my mouth directly, and another pill directly in her mouth. And pretty soon our faces were almost in the plate. And I want to go home. And he said, oh, okay, sure. So we staggered out of there. And his chauffeur was not there at the parking lot. And this was a steak restaurant right next to the Whiskey A Go-Go where we were. Another restaurant that's no longer there. But so I said, where did your chauffeur go? And he said, oh, he had something else to do, but I'll drive you home. So he drove us up to this place up in the hills that was like, he said his office, and he wanted to show us his awards for I Spy and everything. And turned out it was basically his bawling pad, with the, awards and posters framed on the wall. Anyway, she was unconscious and I saved her from being raped by him while she was unconscious, and I became collateral damage. And then he walked out and left us there and told a cab, but we didn't know where we were. And the phone we discovered was a prop.
Oh my God.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Yeah. So we ran out and staggered all the way down to the Strip and managed to get home. And it was a pretty horrific thing. So, after I became very suicidal, and after a period of time, I wound up just walking away from everything. I just packed my dog, my guitar case, and whatever I could stuff in the car, and hit the road. Moved out to Topanga Canyon for a year, where I met my daughter's father. He was another singer-songwriter, guitar picker, son of a Louisiana congressman, Cajun congressman, and we just hit the road. And wound up in Louisiana for a few years on the bayou. Had my daughter Mardi Gras night. It was a lot of fun. Everybody else was having fun. I was in labor.
You're in labor. So tell us, because this is super important. First of all, about the Senator Connie Leva's bill, SB 813.
Well, I'm going. Yeah. So after all those years, I finally broke my silence November 22nd of 2014 about my experience with Cosby. And I started speaking out in the media all the time. So 2016 came along. So the whole 2015, we were doing CNN, Inside Edition, A&E, Dr. Phil, Don Lemon specials, NBC Dateline. It was a whirlwind of media interviews. And so several of us sister survivors bonded, and we became very close, and we formed a sisterhood because we all have the same common denominator. We all have the same rapist. And so comes 2016, and a friend of mine who used to be the director of women's issues in Sacramento let me know that there was this meeting being chaired by Ivy Bettini, who was one of the founders of the National Organization of Women. And she was like 89, blind practically, with a caregiver, but she had been watching Law and Order Special Victims Unit and was becoming so infuriated by the injustices, that were happening, that she called a meeting. And I showed up. Lily Bernard, who is the Afro-Cuban artist, who our sister survivor, she's one of the other women who the media called upon most frequently because we were a good match on the camera. We were both actresses. We were both educated, intelligent, articulate, and they knew they could get a reliable interview with us. So, and we looked good together, the young, vibrant African-American, Afro-Cuban artist and the old blonde, So we did a lot of interviewing together, and we were founding members of that with Carolyn Heldman, who's a PhD political science professor at Occidental and was a talking head on Fox. And she became the co-chair and strategized our whole lobbying, testifying, rallying on the state capitol steps. And we had tried to go to our vice president to write the bill. First, we'd gone to Connie Leyva, and she's a senator from San Bernardino County, and she wasn't interested until we went to our now amazing vice president. And as soon as we started to go to her, Connie said, "Oh, I'll do it." And so she wrote our bill, SB 813. And a bunch of us, we carpooled up to Sacramento. Carolyn got sweets for us, and we were out there. We had our T-shirts with, our aerosol logo on them, and we testified in front of the Senate Committee for Public Safety. We rallied on the state capitol steps. We walked everywhere with Gloria Allred, who I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with throughout this process. She's an amazing woman, no matter what anybody says about her. She's a rock star, in my opinion. And actually, a little soundbite of my testifying in front of the Senate Committee is in her documentary called Seeing All Red, which is fabulous. You've got to see it. It's on Netflix. And so we just did it. We testified everywhere anybody would listen. And finally, and Governor Brown wasn't interested in signing it. He had some issues about that. And everybody put pressure. I wrote him a letter early the morning, an email, and just happened to mention that the night before my son died, I had dinner with Linda Ronstadt, who, as you know, used to be his girlfriend. And I kind of indicated in my letter that he needed to stop riding fences. And later that day, he did sign the bill. And so it became effective January 1st, 2017. It was not retroactive, only from that point forward. Now, this past couple of years, there was a window of opportunity for women who had been minors when they were raped.
Okay, so there was an exception to the rule.
Well, not at that time. This was another bill, and I can't remember the name of the bill. And so some of the sisters who were raped by various people when they were minors were able to file. But it still didn't help adult survivors whose statute of limitations had long expired. Now, as of, I think it was September, possibly a new bill has been written, and Governor Newsom signed it, allowing those whose statute of limitations had expired by 2017, but were raped after 2009, could also file. There's also an exception, a 1-year window of opportunity for those of us to file who go way back.
Okay. But
only 1 year. So I can't really discuss anything more about that in my case.
At the end of the day, how many women came forward as Cosby victims?
There were 62 of us public, and each of us knew probably one or two more.
Wow.
Who were afraid to go public. Yeah. Ugh. He is probably the most prolific serial rapist of the 20th century.
Sure.
And he's walking free. Now, Harvey Weinstein got another 16 years tagged on to his existing 35.
Right, I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be a life sentence, pretty sure.
Well, yeah, for sure. He's going to die. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the name of the 4-part series on Showtime that they did? I watched it and it was amazing, but for our listeners.
We need to talk about Cosby.
We need to talk about Cosby. That's right.
Yeah.
Great series.
Yeah, W. Kamau Bell.
Yeah, I encourage our listeners to find that on Showtime. It's a 4-part series and it's impressive.
And Seeing Red.
Yeah.
Seeing all red.
Seeing all red. Great.
Yeah.
So Victoria has written her memoir, My Dirty Diamonds, The Repurposed Life of a Playboy Icon and Cosby Survivor. Is it available right now for people to purchase? Where can they find it, or still in the works?
Well, it was published the end of September. And it was a bestseller before 9:45 that morning for 2 months. And then there was a little bit of a glitch with the publisher. Mm-hmm. And so it is now unpublished. I am working on going through it with another proofreader because there were a lot of errors and typos and, things that were not properly done.
Well, yeah, it needs to be on point because this is an important story. It's your book. It's your life. So it needs to be done just right, as you and I had discussed. So with that said, it will be available. And when it is, we'll go ahead and make an announcement on the show and let people know. But it is called My Dirty Diamonds, The Repurposed Life. Dirty Diamonds, yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah. And Dirty Diamonds is really kind of a metaphor. It came from an actual anecdote back when I was working at the club, and anyone who reads the book can read that story, so I won't take up the time telling that story, but the metaphor for life, really, because we're all given these beautiful, brilliant gifts in life, and if we don't take care of them, they get dirty.
I love that. Yeah.
We're wearing them all the time, and we don't notice. To us, they still look fine. Mm-hmm. But they get dulled and they lose their sparkle, they lose their shine, they lose their luminosity because we haven't valued them enough to take care of them properly. And I think that speaks to, the gifts of the soul, the gifts that we were given at birth, the gift of life, the gift of beauty, the gift of intelligence, the gift of spirituality, all of those things, and the gift of love and unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And I learned from my youngest daughter who said, "Mama, healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And, you're right. Mm-hmm. Healthy boundaries. And we have to feel entitled to establish healthy boundaries for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And additionally, not only healthy boundaries, but we have to stop just teaching women how to protect themselves. We have to teach little boys right from the very beginning. We have to re-educate the men in our lives and in the world to respect and honor women.
Absolutely.
And then we have to teach the women to demand it, to feel entitled to it. Mm-hmm. A lot of us don't feel entitled to respect and honor, and that's something that needs to change.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's a really, really good statement, and one that we should all live by. Absolutely.
Well, on behalf of all women, we're just so glad that you went after this bill and changed things for survivors, because, I mean, it needed to be done. And just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria.
Well, you're welcome. There are 2 other bills that we have to work on having codified, aside from abolishing the statute of limitations on a federal level. There are many of my sister survivors who are now codifying the statute. They expanded the statute in Nevada. Lisa Lotta Lublin in Nevada, and Heidi Thomas and Beth Ferrier-Tillow, all of us Cosby survivors. They expanded the statute of limitations from, I think, 4 years to 20 years.
Good.
But now they're trying to abolish it completely. And so they're working there.
Good.
Also, we're trying to codify the legal definition of consent. During the Cosby trials, we discovered that there is no legal definition of consent.
I had no idea.
Wow.
I had no idea. Is there anything that we could do? Are there a list of people we can write letters to? What could we do to help?
Well, absolutely. You must write your representative, write your congressman, write your senators. Absolutely write and rally and have meetings and find people who know how to write bills and get out there and speak about it at every opportunity. Absolutely. And the other thing, let me mention, I don't know how we are on time, but that I think is very important. You know, the Equal Rights Amendment that was ratified in 1964 is not ratified in every state. It's state by state. So here in California, I am equal to a man under the Equal Rights Amendment. You in Texas are not.
I don't think I realized.
Texas, and nor breed of a state, as we know.
Wow.
Nor in Alabama, nor in Louisiana, nor in Mississippi, nor in Georgia. Most of the southern states are the ones where women are not equal under the law, under the Constitution, to men. So, as an example, I'm equal here in California, but if I come to, say, Mississippi for any reason, to visit, say, my nephew who might live in Mississippi, a younger nephew whose diapers I changed, perhaps,
right,
who has the same ancestral roots as I have, he will be equal under the Constitution to other men, but I'm not. The old auntie who changed his diapers, whose ancestors also fought in the Revolutionary War, will not be equal and will not have the same rights under the Constitution as he does.
Okay.
So you think about that seriously.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it's,
it's important to know.
Voices and collective, the more and more and the more we show up and write our representatives and whatnot, it's important. Okay. So we do need to wrap up. We have a guest waiting. But at the end of each show, we ask 2 questions and we want to ask you. Okay.
Okay.
Do you remember what they were?
No.
Okay. Well, you'll get it.
My mind is reeling. I'm writing letters in my mind already.
So 3 words to you that define Hugh Hefner.
Old school romantic.
Oh, I love that you said that. That's brilliant. That's so true.
Gosh, what else? A little delusional about women at the end of his life.
The end of his life. I think we are in agreement on that. It kind of seemed to go downhill towards the end, for sure.
Yeah. he was also very patriarchal.
Yeah.
You know, many of the things that we are rebelling against right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I think that he blew the lid off of, well, he kicked the sexual revolution into high gear.
Yeah, he did. Absolutely. He's very responsible for that.
And, in the beginning, made it possible for women to own their own sexuality.
Exactly. Okay.
And not be ashamed.
Right. And not be ashamed. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question. Had you had the opportunity to speak to Hef before he passed or in memoriam, what would you say?
I would say thank you for giving me a platform.
Yay. I love that.
That's
wonderful. That's good.
And I'm the oldest woman who's ever posed for Playboy, by the way, since Jane Seymour.
Right.
I posed
when you came back for the equality issue. Yeah, you were one of the, that's awesome. Yeah. I love it.
That's fantastic.
I love it. We'll throw those pictures up actually during editing so our audience will be able to see the scope of what you've done. So thank you so much, Victoria. This has been lovely. I appreciate you. I love you. So much respect.
It was so nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Well, it was great. It was a lot of fun. Thanks,
proud to have you as a Playboy Centerfolds sister.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sisters forever.
Forever.
To our audience, don't forget to follow us, like us, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's The Bunny Chronicles. Follow us on Instagram at TBC Vodcast, as in The Bunny Chronicles Vodcast. And that's a wrap. I'm Echo.
I'm Carrie.
And this is
The Bunny Chronicles.
See you next week.